Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study call. We are studying Genevieve Behrend's book, Your Invisible Power. We are currently in chapter 9, and we're partway through the story of how that she attracted to herself $20,000 because she needed $20,000 so that then she could go study with Thomas Troward, who later became her mentor. And so yesterday we went a little over her story there, how she was visualizing every morning, every night. And then there came a certain point where things just kind of clicked within inside of her. And she realized that she was a creative center and that money, that $20,000 was already hers. And so I just want to start with the last paragraph we ended off with yesterday to continue on with this story for today, and we'll finish this story. Just as soon as there appeared a circumstance which indicated the direction through which the $20,000 might come, I not only made a supreme effort to regard the indicated direction calmly, as the first sprout of the seed I had sown in the absolute, but left no stone unturned to follow up that direction by fulfilling my part. By so doing, one circumstance seemed naturally to lead to another, until step by step my desired $20,000 was secured. To keep my mind poised and free from excitement was my greatest effort. And remember, we talked about this idea that if you come to that realization, you tap into that source of power. You don't want to get overly excited. You don't want to get into a state of mind where things seem fantastical, because you want to treat it as something normal, something natural. Because if it's something fantastical, if it's something out of the ordinary, then you're going to think of it as that, and it's going to be hard to tap into that thing when you need to. But if it's something ordinary, if it's something normal, if it's an everyday part of life, then you'll be able to tap into it at will. And so she said that was really her greatest thing, is remaining in a normal state, instead of getting wrapped up into the excitement of it. And I don't know if I went into this yesterday, but I think that there is some truth to that idea of staying to that. I don't think that it's always a bad idea to have that feeling of excitement, as far as when we're visualizing and thinking about the things that are coming, when we're trying to create what it is that we want in our life. Because that excitement, that cheering ourselves on, can help us to create and to move towards greater heights. This first concrete fruition of my study of mental science, as expounded by Troward's book, had come by a careful following of the methods he had outlined. In this connection, therefore, I can offer to the reader no better gift than to quote Troward's book, The Edinburgh Lectures, from which may be derived a complete idea of the line of action I was endeavoring to follow. In the chapter on causes and conditions, he says, "To get good results, we must properly understand our relation to the great impersonal power we are using. It is intelligent, and we are intelligent, and the two intelligences must cooperate. We must not fly in the face of the law, expecting it to do for us what it can only do through us. And we must therefore use our intelligence with the knowledge that it is acting as an instrument of a greater intelligence. And because we have this knowledge, we may and should cease from all anxiety as to the final result." Excuse me. So I think that there's some key ideas in that. It looks like she goes on to quote him quite a bit, but let's break down a little bit of what we have read so far. So you must understand your relation to this impersonal power. And I think there's a lot of keys here when they're talking about these things, because they use ideas that are just so profound. Impersonal power, it's a word to describe this power, and just that one little word is so profound, because this power that permeates and penetrates everything, is behind everything, is impersonal. It doesn't take sides with anything. It doesn't go with anything and say, oh, I'm only going to benefit the rich, or I'm only going to benefit the poor, or I'm only going to benefit the people in this locality, or this type of people that look this way. No, that it is impersonal, and it benefits and can benefit everyone, anyone, in the sense that we are all this creative center. All of humankind is. Now, the animals and all of the rest of creation seem to be benefactors of this greater intelligence, just naturally working through them through their what's the word I'm looking for? Their instincts. They're naturally born with instincts, but we as humans have the ability to choose. We have free will, that we can choose and go where it is that we want. And so in that sense, because we have that free will, we can create whatever it is that we want. See, an animal can only create along the lines of what it already is, but we can create whatever it is that we want because we have that power to choose. But we must understand that there is this intelligence, and we are an intelligence, and that this greater intelligence wants to work through us. And now the idea is that I think some people get off track here when they think of things like God, and they think of these higher powers and wanting to work through this, that they get this idea of maybe like fate or destiny, and that they don't like the idea that they're not able to choose and they're not able to work out what it is that they want, because they feel like, if they're forced to work along the lines of what this greater power, this deity, this God is trying to force them, that somehow that will make them unhappy. But the idea is, and this is, I think, a key to understand, is that this higher power, this intelligence, this God, however you want to call it, if it works through you the way that it wants to, it will be to your best benefit, and it will be to your best happiness. See, it's not going to work through you in such a way that you are miserable, that you are unhappy. It's going to work through you in such a way that you can prosper, and that you can be most satisfied and most edified in what it is that you're doing. Because, see, this higher power, because it created you, we've talked about this idea before, it knows you better than you know yourself. So if you were to go out there and you were to just create whatever it is that you wanted, thinking that that was going to be your happiness, you may or may not get it. But if you allow this power to work through you and to create whatever it is trying to create through you, then you'll actually find your greatest happiness, because this power is going to work through you to your greatest benefit, and for the greatest benefit of all those around you. See, because this power wants to live through you, it wants to expand, it wants to grow. It doesn't want to limit itself as it flows through you and create something through you, because that would be going in the opposite direction. That would be constricting and going back into native element. And it doesn't want to do that. It wants to create and expand. And so we don't need to fear about going along these natural lines of creation that seem to be appearing to us, because they're going to be for our benefit. They're going to be for our best good. And if it is somewhat of a destiny, if it is somewhat of a predestination that we're following along, I mean, as long as it's making us happy, as long as it's making us fulfilled, I don't see the problem of why we wouldn't want to follow this, why we wouldn't want to go with it. Let's see. And we must therefore use our intelligence with the knowledge that it is acting as an instrument of a greater intelligence. Again, that greater intelligence. And because we have this knowledge, we may and should cease from all anxiety as to the final result. Now, once you catch on to this idea, once you enter into this creative power and you're working with this higher intelligence, what you're working with God to create what it is in your life, and you realize that whatever it is that you need, you can create, then you lose all doubt and fear. You cease from anxiety, as Troward said here, because you know that you can create whatever it is that you want. And if you can create whatever it is you want, there's nothing to fear. But you can just move forward in faith and move forward in greater power and majesty in creating what it is that you desire out of your life. All right, let's move on here. In actual practice, we must first form the ideal conception of our object with the definite intention of impressing it upon the universal mind. It is this thought that takes such thought out of the region of mere casual fancies. and then affirm that our knowledge of the law is sufficient reason for a calm expectation of a corresponding result, and that therefore all necessary conditions will come to us in due order. Now, again, I've mentioned this before. Thomas Troward is very intellectual in his writing, and you can see here. And so I really want to break this down, because just a casual listening or a casual reading of it, I think that you don't catch exactly what it is that he's talking about here. So let's break this down. In actual practice, we must first form the ideal conception of our object with a definite intention of impressing it upon the universal mind. So first, we must have a clear picture of what it is that we want in our mind, that ideal conception of the object that we're wanting to create. And then we must intend to impress upon the universal mind that intention, what it is that we want. And I've talked about in this study how there are two parts in which we take part in this creation. So we must have a clear vision of what it is that we want, and then we must have an uplifted emotion attached to that. And as we visualize, as we think through our mind and see ourselves living out that possibility, that we feel those feelings and we act as if those things are already true. And that's what he's talking about here, is that we impress upon this universal mind and we affirm that the knowledge of this law is sufficient for a calm expectation of a corresponding result. So we're not fretting, we're not worrying, we just expect the result of what we're envisioning in our mind to happen in our outer world. And then we know that every necessary condition, everything for that to come, will come to us in due order. So remember, as I've talked about this before, that we have this uplifted emotion, we have this clear vision in our mind, and then opportunities will start showing up in our life. The tools, the people, the resources that we need to move forward in obtaining the thing that we want will just start to show up in our life. They'll come to us. We don't need to go out there and search for them. They will come to us. And when you learn this process and you learn that this is the way, you start to pay attention to what shows up in your life and what is in your life, and start to move towards those things and take advantage of them, because they lead you step by step towards what it is that you want next. We can then turn to the affairs of our daily life with the calm assurance that the initial conditions are either there already or will soon come into view. Now, there is a scripture. It's one that I absolutely love, but it's in Isaiah, and the idea is that the Lord was telling the people, the faithful, that before you have called, I have answered. While you are yet speaking, I am near. The idea is that that God, this universal substance, this intelligence that is behind everything, before we've even said our prayer, before we've even called upon him to start into action these creative forces, that it has already set in place all the things for our advancement, for our obtaining of this thing. And so it's not about that God has to set in order all these things once we've come upon this vision, but it's our responsibility to see what God has already done. And I find that so just like amazing that God can orchestrate things in such a way that before we've even prayed, before we've even built this image in our mind and we've sought to manifest something, that the way to do it has already been prepared beforehand. And so it's then our responsibility to just see what God has already done in our life, that God's work is already finished. We just need to find what he has done and then take our own part in that creation to further advance our life. If we do not at once see them, let us rest content with the knowledge that the spiritual prototype is already in existence, and wait till some circumstance pointing in the desired direction begins to show itself. So if, like I said, God has already created the way for us to get what it is that we want. He's already set in motion the circumstances so we can create the desired effect in our life. And so if at first we don't see what God has already done for us, we don't want to fret, we don't want to get concerned, but we want to just have faith that God is still working, that he has already created, and wait for some circumstance pointing to what God has already put in our life. The direction will show itself. And so again, we don't need to go out there to look. We don't need to fret or worry, concern ourselves with what God is trying to do, but just sit back in the assurance of that vision that we have in our mind and that uplifted emotion, and that God is bringing that thing to us. And then the way will be shown to us. The way will appear. It may be a very small circumstance, but it is the direction and not the magnitude that is to be taken into consideration. As soon as we see it, we should regard it as the first sprouting of the seed sown in the absolute, and do calmly and without excitement whatever the circumstances seem to require. And then later on we shall see that this doing will in turn lead to a further circumstance in the same direction, until we find ourselves conducted step by step to the accomplishment of our object. And so whenever you have this vision in your mind of what it is that you're wanting to create, and you're putting that out there, you're starting that creation, that full vision of whatever you want isn't going to come back in all of its glory to you right off the bat, but some little circumstance, some little thing for you to do, for you to take advantage of, will show up first. Because sometimes the thing that we want is greater than us. It is more than us. And so we have to kind of grow into the ability to be able to have that. So it's kind of the idea that if you're not a very good, let's say that you only know how to use the financial resources of $50,000 a year, but you want to move to $1 million a year. You've never had $1 million a year. You don't know how to use $1 million a year effectively to bless the lives of people around you and yourself. And so the $1 million isn't going to show up right off the bat for you to be able to take advantage of, because you don't know how to use it. So it will, this whole process of you obtaining that $1 million will cause you to grow. It'll cause you to stretch, so that when you do obtain the $1 million a year, that you know how to use it, that it's not going to be to your detriment. It's not going to be to your downfall. And all of these creative processes are working in that way for your advancement. And so an opportunity for you, so let's say you're going after the $1 million, an opportunity might show up for you to increase your health, for you to go out and to exercise. And you think, well, that's not going to get me the $1 million. But you don't know, maybe somewhere down the line, for you to be able to engage in something that's going to get you the $1 million, your health needs to be in such a state to where you can act in certain ways for that to be able to come. And so you need to improve your physical body, or you might need to improve your physical mind, or any number of things that you might need to improve that might not seem like it's leading you towards it, but that is the opportunity. So take advantage of all the opportunities that are showing up in front of you, regardless of whether you think that it's going to lead you towards the thing that you want. And it may be a small thing too, but just take care of the things that are in your physical environment. Now, one of the people, and I think I mentioned him before on this study call, his name's Jordan Peterson. And now Jordan Peterson talks about the idea of cleaning your own room. And he kind of said it a little tongue in cheek in the beginning, but it became this very actually powerful thing. But the idea is that you in your life right now have something in your environment that is completely under your control, that you can organize, that you can order, that you can bring into harmony with everything around you to beautify it. So take advantage of that thing, beautify that thing that you have in front of you right now, and then it will lead you on to more opportunities. Act where you are now. Don't try to go and act and like go out there and search, as I've been talking, but act where you are now, and it will lead you towards something better. In this way, the understanding of the great principle of the law of supply will, by repeated experiences, deliver us more and more completely out of the region of anxious thought and toilsome labor, and bring us into a new world where the useful employment of all of our powers, whether mental or physical, will only be an unfolding of our individuality upon the lines of its own nature. and therefore a perpetual source of health and happiness. So he's talking about what I was talking about just a little bit earlier, that as you go through this unfoldment of life, as you go step by step towards the vision that you're trying to create, this law of supply, this source from which everything comes from, will lead you along step by step to greater powers, to greater mental and physical abilities, and an unfoldment of your individuality. So it's not going to subject you into trying to mold you into something that you're not, but it'll actually uncover who you really are. And I find that really invigorating and fascinating, that when we enter into this creation process, it actually uncovers more of who we really are and makes us into a greater individual. I know a lot of people think that when they look at religions and certain kinds of things, that it's trying to mold everybody into one type of thing. But in actuality, if you follow the precepts of a lot of those religions and what a lot of them are trying to teach, it actually uncovers your individuality. Remember, we are all part of this whole, but we are an individual part of that whole, that you are different from me, and that I am different from the next guy, and that we have our own individual part to play in this grand whole, this grand scheme of creation. And if we can enter into and discover by following step by step our individuality, we would find our most enjoyment and our most happiness out of that thing. And that's what he's talking about here. And that's what I talked about previously. And so we don't need to worry that this is going to create some circumstances that we wouldn't enjoy or that we wouldn't want. A sufficient inducement, surely, to the careful study of the laws governing the relation between the individual and the universal mind. So as you go along in this process, you will, as he says, let's see, let me find it. You'll go out of the region of anxious thought and toilsome labor. You'll enter into it's not like you're not doing anything, because you're going to be doing something, but the work is going to be enjoyable. It's not going to be toilsome labor. There will be labor, but it won't be toilsome labor. And you'll find the laws governing the relation between you and this universal mind. You'll gain a greater relationship between you and God, you and creation, whatever it is that you want to call it. To my mind, then as now, this quotation outlines the core and center of the method and manner of approach necessary for coming into touch with infinite supply. At least it, together with the previously quoted statement, my mind is a center of divine operation, etc., constituted the only apparent means of attracting to myself the $20,000. My constant endeavor to get into the spirit of these statements and to attract to myself this needed sum was about 6 weeks, at the end of which time I had in my bank the required $20,000. This could be made into a long story giving all the details, but the facts, as already narrated, will give you a definite idea of the magnetic condition of my mind while the $20,000 was finding its way to me. Now, I remember when I first started my study into some of these things, some of my mentors would share a story, and they would share kind of what it was that they did, and they would share the end result, but they wouldn't, talk about all the steps along the way. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I want to know all the steps along the way so that I can follow them. And they would refuse to talk about some of those kinds of things, because those things that they did along the way were individual to them. And if we were to try to follow those individual steps, we would come to failure, because our individual steps, what we need to do along our journey, are going to be different. And so all that we need to know is the end result, what we're trying to go after, and then the process of what we need to do to cause the creative powers to go, and then to take advantage of the steps that come along our way. And just as surely as she got $20,000, or what would be equivalent to hundreds of $1,000s in our day and age, we would get the same result. And so just understand that if you follow this process, if you go about this creative process, that you will gain so much more power. You'll gain so much more clarity on who you are as an individual, that why wouldn't we want to enter into this process? Now, it's going to require effort. It's going to require you to grow, to stretch, but that stretching, that growing, is going to be for your ultimate benefit. All right, we'll end. That's the end of the chapter. We'll end it there. Um, and then she's going to the next chapter, chapter 10, she's going to talk further about her journey in becoming Thomas Troward's student. So she knew that she needed the $20,000 so that then she could start the journey. And then now she's going to start this journey on becoming the pupil of Thomas Troward. And just a little bit of a backstory, or kind of an idea of the difficulty of this, is Thomas Troward never took any pupils. He never took any students on. He taught his things in lectures and stuff, but he never took on personal students until Genevieve Behrend. And so she did something that no one had ever done before. And so we'll get into that story tomorrow, and continue on with this. And it's really fascinating the way that all this comes about for her. And again, it's that step-by-step process. Pay attention to what's in your life right now, improve upon what's in your life right now, and the next step will be shown to you. You take advantage of the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and the next step, and then eventually you'll get to the vision that you've been creating in your mind. And with that, we'll end it for today. Go ahead and make yourself a wonderful day, and we will see you all tomorrow morning. And until then, bye for now.